Before the sun ever touched the rooftops of the town, before engines started and alarms rang, there was already a man awake. His name was Michael. He was not famous. He was not wealthy. And if you passed him on the street, you would not look twice. Michael was a roof carpenter, one of those men you only notice when you need him. His hands were permanently rough, his fingernails never quite clean, his shoulders shaped by years of lifting, balancing, and trusting gravity not to betray him. Every weekday morning, Michael's alarm went off at 4:45 a.m., not because anyone demanded it, not because he enjoyed waking early, but because he had somewhere to be. He rose quietly so as not to disturb the neighbors in his small apartment building. He washed his face with cold water, pulled on his work clothes, and packed the same simple lunch he had carried for years. There was no rush in his movements, no anxiety. He knew exactly how much time he had. At 5:15 a.m., Michael stepped into the street, the world still half asleep, and began walking towards St. Augustine's Church. St. Augustine's was not a grand cathedral. It was modest, old, and familiar to the people who lived nearby. The paint on the exterior had faded slightly over the years. The steps had been worn smooth by generations of feet. But the doors were always unlocked. Inside, the air was still. The smell of old wood and candle wax lingered softly. The only light came from the sanctuary lamp, glowing steadily near the altar. Michael entered the church the same way every morning. He removed his cap. He dipped his fingers in holy water. He genuflected slowly. Then he walked to the third pew on the right and sat down. Sometimes he closed his eyes. Sometimes he simply looked forward. And every morning, every single morning, he said the same words, quietly, without drama. "Good morning, Jesus. I just came to greet you before work." That was all. No long prayer, no pleading, no list of needs, just a greeting. Michael did not stay long. 5 minutes on days when work was heavy. 10 minutes when the day felt lighter. Then he stood, bowed his head once more, and left the church exactly as he had entered. No one ever told him to do this. No one ever rewarded him for it. But Michael believed something simple and unshakable. If someone mattered to you, you showed up. The priest noticed Michael. So did the sacristan, who unlocked the church each night and locked it again after the morning Massachusetts. The cleaning lady sometimes saw him leaving just as she arrived. They knew him as the roofer, but Michael never spoke about his faith. On job sites, he was quiet, reliable, calm in situations that made other men curse or panic. When coworkers complained about the danger of roofing, Michael would shrug. "You just do the work in front of you." They didn't know that every morning, before stepping onto ladders and beams, Michael had already placed his life somewhere else. It was a Tuesday, clear sky, no wind, perfect working conditions. Michael climbed onto the roof of a 2-story building with the ease of someone who had done it thousands of times. His movements were careful but confident, each step deliberate. Then something changed. A board, old, weakened by time and weather, gave way beneath his foot. There was no warning. One moment Michael was standing. The next he was falling. Witnesses later said the sound of his body hitting the ground was sickening. Someone shouted. Someone else froze. Michael did not scream. He couldn't. When Michael opened his eyes, the sky was gone. Bright lights replaced it. White walls. Machines humming softly. Pain came in waves, but worse than the pain was what he couldn't feel. His legs. Doctors spoke in measured voices, careful not to promise what they could not deliver. Spinal trauma. Severe nerve damage. Paralysis from the waist down. One sentence echoed louder than the rest. "You may never walk again." Hospitals have a way of dissolving time. Morning, afternoon, night. It all blends together. Michael lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of machines. At first, people visited often. Co-workers, a supervisor, a cousin he hadn't seen in years. Then visits slowed. Then they stopped. Michael did not complain. But something inside him felt heavier than the injury. For the first time in years, he could not go greet Jesus. Yet every morning, at 5:15 a.m., something remarkable happened. Michael would close his eyes, not because he was asleep, but because his body remembered. He whispered the words, not aloud, but in his heart. "Good morning, Jesus. I just came to greet you." Nurses noticed that he always seemed calmer after that hour. They assumed it was medication. They were wrong. The first weeks after the diagnosis passed in a strange quiet. Not the kind of quiet that brings peace, but the kind that presses against the chest. Michael learned the rhythms of the hospital. The sound of carts rolling down the hallway at dawn. The distant cough of another patient behind a thin wall. The soft beeping of machines that never truly slept. At night, when the lights dimmed and the world narrowed to a single bed, the questions came. Not angry questions, not accusing ones, just heavy ones. Why now? Why this body? Why me? Michael had spent his entire adult life trusting his body. It was how he earned his living, how he survived, how he stayed independent. Now it lay there, unresponsive, distant, as though it no longer belonged to him. And yet, every morning at 5:15 he still greeted Jesus. Even when doubt whispered, even when hope thinned, rehabilitation was harder than the fall. Pain could be managed, loss could not. Therapists were kind but honest. Progress was slow, sometimes non-existent. Some days Michael left sessions exhausted not from effort, but from disappointment. He watched other patients struggle too. Some improved, some didn't. Some learned to smile despite the reality settling in. Michael tried to do the same, but there were nights when he turned his face toward the wall so the nurses wouldn't see his eyes fill with tears. It wasn't fear of pain. It was fear of permanence. People often imagine faith as something strong, confident, unwavering. Michael learned that faith can also feel quiet, fragile, tired. Some mornings, when he whispered his greeting, the words felt thin, like they might disappear before reaching heaven. But he said them anyway, because faith, he believed, was not about feeling something. It was about showing up. It happened on a gray afternoon, weeks into his hospitalization. Rain tapped gently against the window. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee from the nurse's station down the hall. Michael had just returned from a difficult therapy session. His muscles ached. His spirit felt heavier than usual. He lay back, eyes half closed. That's when he noticed someone standing near the door. A man, middle-aged, simply dressed. Nothing about him stood out, except the calm he carried into the room. The man didn't rush. He didn't announce himself. He walked over and sat beside the bed as if he had done it before. They talked quietly, not about illness, not about recovery timelines. The man asked Michael about his work. Michael smiled for the first time that day. He talked about rooftops, about the early mornings, about the strange peace of standing high above the ground when the world is still asleep. The man listened closely. Then he said something unexpected. "You always made time before work." Michael nodded, surprised. "I liked starting the day that way." There was no judgment in the man's voice, no pity, just understanding. They sat in silence for a moment. Not awkward, comfortable. After a while, the man stood. He straightened his jacket, looked at Michael gently, and said, "I should go now. I just came to greet you." The room seemed to still. The words struck something deep inside Michael. Something familiar, something forgotten and suddenly remembered all at once. Before he could respond, before he could ask the obvious question, he felt it. It began as warmth, not emotional warmth, physical, a spreading sensation, starting low, moving upward. Michael's breath caught. He looked down at his legs. He willed them to move. They did. His heart raced. His hands trembled. Slowly, almost afraid to believe it, Michael swung his legs over the side of the bed. He placed his feet on the floor and stood. A nurse rushed in, startled by the movement. Another followed. Then a doctor. Tests were ordered immediately. Scans repeated. Charts reviewed again and again. The results made no sense. The damage that had been there was gone. No gradual improvement. No partial recovery. Complete restoration. Michael kept asking one question. Where is the man who was just here? No one had seen him. No visitor log. No camera footage. No record. It was as if he had never existed. Later that night, alone again, Michael lay awake. And it came to him not as a voice, not as a vision, but as clarity. Every morning, the same words. I just came to greet you. Michael covered his face with his hands and wept. Not from shock, not from fear, but from understanding. He had kept showing up. And now, Jesus had returned the visit. If you think this story is about healing, stay with it. Because what happens after the miracle reveals its true meaning. The morning Michael left the hospital, the sun was already up. Felt strange to him. For months, mornings had meant white ceilings and the hum of machines. Now there were birds, wind, the simple sound of shoes on pavement. He walked slowly, not because he had to, but because he wanted to feel every step. Each movement felt deliberate, earned. Doctors called it medically inexplicable. Administrators used phrases like remarkable recovery. Paperwork was signed. Follow-up appointments scheduled. But Michael knew better than to argue with language. Some things, he understood, were not meant to be explained away. Michael did not go home first. Instead, he turned left at the corner, toward St. Augustine's. The church doors were open, just as they always had been. Inside, nothing had changed. The pews, the altar, the quiet glow of the sanctuary lamp. Michael removed his cap and stood still for a long moment. His chest tightened, not with pain, but with gratitude too large for words. He walked to the third pew on the right, kneeled, and for the first time since the accident he spoke aloud. Good morning, Jesus. His voice broke slightly. I came to greet you, that was all. No explanation, no bargaining, no vow to be better or louder or different. Just a greeting, just presence. News traveled slowly. Michael did not post about his healing. He did not give interviews. He did not tell his story unless someone asked. And even then, he spoke carefully. I got better, he would say. I was blessed. Some believed him. Some smiled politely. Some quietly wondered. Michael did not mind. He had learned something important in the hospital. Miracles do not always ask to be believed. They ask to be lived. Returning to work took time. His employer hesitated at first. Liability, concerns, questions. But Michael was patient. He always had been. When he finally climbed a ladder again, his hands trembled. Not from weakness, but from memory. He moved more slowly now, more intentionally, each step placed with care. Up there, high above the ground, Michael no longer felt invincible. He felt grateful. Michael still woke up at 4:45 a.m., still packed the same lunch, still walked the same streets, still entered the same church, still sat in the same pew, and still every morning he said the same words, because the miracle had not changed his faith. It had confirmed it. Sometimes, in the quiet of the church, Michael would remember the man from the hospital, the calm in his voice, the familiarity in his eyes, the simplicity of his words. I just came to greet you. Michael realized something over time. Jesus had not come as a spectacle. He had not come surrounded by light or thunder or angels. He had come the same way Michael always had. Quietly, faithfully, personally. Michael eventually understood that the miracle was never just about walking again. It was about being seen. Seen in the early mornings when no one else was awake. Seen in the quiet prayers that asked for nothing. Seen in faithfulness that expected no reward. The greeting mattered. The consistency mattered. The showing up mattered. Years later, when Michael's hair had begun to gray and his steps had slowed naturally with age, he was once asked by a young man from the parish, "Why did you always come so early?" Michael smiled. Because I didn't want to rush God. Early morning. A church still half dark. A sanctuary lamp burning steadily. A man kneeling not because he must, but because he wants to. Faith does not always move mountains. Sometimes it simply keeps showing up. And sometimes it is remembered. If this story lingered in your heart, Pause for a moment and ask yourself, who do you show up for each day without expecting anything in return? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more meaningful stories.